we have to talk about the absolute chaos that's playing out right here at home for millions of Louisiana voters. Because their governor just announced that he is suspending primary elections for the state's congressional seats so that Republicans can redraw election maps. And that is despite the fact that early voting is set to start in a matter of days and some ballots have already been sent out. But of course, this move, it comes just 24 hours after the Supreme Court struck down Louisiana's current congressional map in a sweeping decision that effectively gutted the Voting Rights Act and gave red states a massive edge in all future elections. Because like we talked about yesterday, the map in question there made it so that black voters had a majority in 2 of the state's 6 congressional districts in order to reflect the fact that they're a third of the state. Or they were trying to comply with the VRA, which prevents racial gerrymandering that dilutes the power of minority voters. But the now conservative Supreme Court, they ruled that the map itself actually amounted to an illegal racial gerrymander. And so they decided that the solution was to actually weaken the VRA and make it a lot easier for states to gerrymander in a way that diminishes the votes of minority groups. And if you're like, that sounds backwards, Phil, yeah. And so because of this ruling, red states that were forced to create minority-majority districts to comply with the VRA, they're now having more leeway to redraw those lines in ways that could give Republicans major electoral advantages in state legislatures and as many as 19 seats in Congress. And so this ruling, it set off this scramble in red states to determine whether they can redo their maps before the midterm elections or if they'll have to wait until 2028. While most states likely can't do too much right now because they've already had their primaries, there are around half a dozen states that could potentially make changes. And a lot of eyes, they're on Louisiana in particular because 1, it was at the center of this case, and 2, the ruling came just days before its primary was supposed to kick off. Literally, early voting for them starts this Saturday for the May 16th primaries. And again, absentee ballots have already been sent to overseas voters weeks ago. So changing everything now, it could and likely will be incredibly disruptive and confusing for voters. But apparently that doesn't matter to the Republicans, with Louisiana's governor and attorney general releasing a joint statement today saying that because of the Supreme Court ruling, the state was prohibited from carrying out congressional elections under the current map, and adding, "We are working together with the legislature and the Secretary of State's office to develop a path forward." But also, to make the situation even more chaotic and confusing, the leaders didn't say whether the suspension only applies to the state's 6 House seats or if they would still hold other primary elections initially scheduled on May 16th, which would include a high-stakes Senate race, constitutional amendments, and several local contests. But actually, as I was recording this, we saw the Louisiana Secretary of State releasing a statement saying that those other primary elections will still be held on May 16th, and that early voting for those races will still start this Saturday, but then adding, "Our office will post notices at each of the early voting sites to alert the public of this change. While the U.S. House races will remain on voters' ballots, any votes cast in those races will not be counted." So you have a situation where these changes are being made so last minute that early voters will literally have to fill out partially defunct ballots that include races that no longer even exist. And apparently they're just going to rely on notices posted at voting locations to inform everyone about this major confusing change. I guess they're just going to put up some printer paper on a doorway that says, "Hey, just skip voting for Congress for now, I guess. If you want your vote to count for realsies, you'll have to come back again on an undetermined date and just, yeah, do it again." So, with just all this chaos, you have advocates and Democrats slamming this move, saying that it's going to create total chaos and undermine the democratic process. You also had one expert explaining that even though it might be legal for Louisiana to move the primary, it's simply not true that the Supreme Court blocked the state from carrying out congressional elections under the old map. And that was something that was echoed by State Representative Kyle Green, a former assistant state attorney general, who argued the court's decision does not halt the election process on its own, and any attempt to suspend or disrupt an ongoing election at this stage would raise serious constitutional concerns. But it's also currently unclear if any meaningful legal challenges will emerge, at least before the new maps are drawn up, right? And that's as the state's Republican legislature has the possibility to gerrymander so they could pick up 1, maybe even 2 seats. But also, when we see this pop up here and there, if they go too hard, they could open themselves up to more legal challenges, which could then drag out this whole process even longer, and who the fuck knows what would happen with the primaries in that hypothetical. And again, this is just Louisiana. Of the states that could still change their maps, Republican lawmakers in the Mississippi legislature, they're already planning to convene a special session, though notably that would just be for state Supreme Court elections. Meanwhile, Republicans in Tennessee are also reportedly debating a pre-midterm redraw, with a Speaker of the State House telling reporters, "We are reviewing the recent opinion as I have conversations with the White House and other individuals," with Trump himself also claiming in a post on Truth Social, "I had a very good conversation with Governor Bill Lee of Tennessee this morning, wherein he stated that he would work hard to correct the unconstitutional flaw in the congressional maps of the great state of Tennessee," adding that all of the other political representatives of Tennessee have promised to do so. And you have Georgia Governor Brian Kemp saying that he is analyzing the ruling and its potential impacts on the midterms. So there, it's unclear what Kemp could actually do because early voting's actually already underway here. In fact, I voted this morning, if you couldn't tell by my obnoxious sticker. I love it. I made my picks. I know a lot of people are wondering. Yes, I voted for Lindsay DeFranco for House District 47. But actually, on a serious note, despite the seemingly insurmountable hurdle, the Georgia House Speaker right now refused to rule out the possibility that the legislature would take up redistricting when pressed by local outlets. And in fact, the Georgia Republican Party chairman voiced support for a move like that. This is just my opinion, but I feel like you can tell that just so many of them are terrified. They know that Trump and much of the party, they're failing their constituents. And many just seem very down to try to undo or ignore the will of the people, right? Rather than actually try to have better policy that helps people.